My name's Neil Symonds. I moved to Chamonix, having travelled the Alps for a few years and working for a tour operator. Ended up managing hotels for them, but wanting to find my own business. So we found Chamonix, my brother and I, and we bought a little bar in Chamonix town. But then before we knew it, people were coming into the bar asking us to look after their accommodations. So keys were swapped and Cham Served was started. We rebranded the rental side of the business to Chamonix Holidays 2 or 3 years later. And here we are 20 years later, a small but successful business, managing and renting properties in the Mont Blanc Valley, mainly in Chamonix, but there are small villages and towns nearby, ski towns nearby, that we also rent out properties. Before we started working with dynamic pricing software solutions, I had that lovely task of being the dynamic price monitor myself. So we would set our prices. Our prices would be weekly prices, and they would change every week of the year. Generally speaking, we would do it in blocks of 2-3 weeks here and 2 or 3 weeks there. We would have to compare our pricing with our competitors. We wouldn't know really what their booking situation was like, what their demand situation was like, and so, but we would monitor 2 or 3 local competitors to see how they were booking, to see what their prices were like, to be comparable. It was a weekly job that probably took me between 4 and 6 hours a week to do. If I was lazy and left it would absolutely show up in our performance. So it's something we had to be really hot with. So that was what we did before we found dynamic pricing. When we started working with Avantio, they had a dynamic pricing software solution in the form of Price Labs, and they were a good business. I met them when we went to a conference, and they seemed very good. But what they offered was slightly different to Beyond in that they were a dynamic pricing solution. They weren't a revenue management and dynamic pricing solution. So if we wanted the revenue management side of things, we had to then work with another provider. And for me, I felt that was a barrier. So after a couple of years, we decided to move over when we found Beyond that offered both solutions in. Price Labs was fine. I did find that when I was comparing the 2 solutions, I did find that the interface with Beyond was much friendlier. It was much easier to look at. It was simpler to manage. It was simpler to set up. The support that I received, especially at the start, during the onboarding process and the training process, was fantastic. We didn't have any of that with Price Labs. I found that very good. You had course you were taught through the first 6 weeks, literally on a weekly basis. Here's another lesson. Here's another class to do, and you had the backup of someone as well almost on a weekly basis, and then it went to monthly and then every quarterly. But it was really as often as I needed it to be to help with training, and especially with Beyond, because it was developing so quickly as well. They were producing new ways of analysing the performance of your properties against others, and the location, and new ways of using that data to better how you can operate, and to try and keep up with that would have been daunting without the support. So I did find Beyond to be a lot more supportive than Price Labs. I just found them to be more dynamic at the end of the day. There's a different level of charging. So with Price Labs, they charge you on I think a per month basis. So if you had 5 properties, you were being charged a fixed rate per property per month, and then if you had 10 properties, then you would charge for those first 5, and then a lower price for the next 5, and then maybe a lower price for the next 5 afterwards, and that was okay. But that may have worked well if your property was renting for 12 months of the year, if you were in Paris or if you're in London or Barcelona, for example. But if you work in a more seasonal area like we do, where winters are key and summers are very good, then I felt we were paying for monthly support and paying a monthly fee during the months where we weren't really getting any bookings. So you'd be inclined to switch them off, which seemed counterintuitive to me. Whereas Beyond charges fairly. It charges a commission based on the value of the rental. It doesn't matter if you've got one property or 1,000 properties, you're being charged the same, a fair and the same amount of money. So Beyond pricing is saving me a part-time worker. So I'm not, whilst it costs me money with Beyond, I don't have to manage Beyond. I don't have to manage their ups and downs. I don't have to manage supply when they're on a holiday. Beyond works all the time. So it's saving me paying someone else to do that job. So that's super important. That's the first thing, that you realise that the more you can use an expert that can probably do it better than me, without having to manage that person, without having to manage their ups and their downs and things like that, that's super important. With Beyond, it is directly analysing comparable properties in a comparable location, and it is not analysing. It analyses what you want to analyse. You can be very specific or you can be very general. So you set the rules. And understanding those rules and then understanding what results you're going to get out is super important as well. I could compare myself to a completely different ski resort if I wanted to, or I can compare myself to the same properties in the same road. And that's quite key, especially when you need to be local with some of your pricing. For example, there are specific endurance races in Chamonix, where I come from. And of course, people want to be next to the start line or next to the finish line, or, not necessarily 5 miles out. So for that particular period, we have to be very specific with who we compare to and our pricing. On another matter, it is, super important from a reporting point of view. I'm just learning now that Beyond Pricing, which I'm really excited to learn, has some great reporting functionality. I'm very interested in being able to present to my owners on a monthly basis a report on the success, on how we operate, on what we've invested in to get the best results for them. And what I'm super interested in is, when I'm looking for new owners, is to be able to provide them with a brochure with these dynamic pricing solutions and the reasons behind them, the reasons behind the variation, and give them an accurate appraisal and quote, if you like, on the sort of rental performance they can achieve. So there are 2 or 3 good examples as why I think Beyond Pricing and dynamic pricing in general is really interesting and something that every property manager should be considering. When we started working with dynamic pricing, it's not only did it save hours, but it increased performance. So it could have been that we linked with a few more channels. It could have been lots of other things. But I did change the way that we are set up within our business, the way that we run things. However, I can say that within 12 months we noticed an increase in the performance of most of our properties, especially in the sort of the areas that we expect to get good bookings. So in the centre of towns, next to the ski lifts, things like that, those properties saw an increase in the revenue per booking by about 20% over the course of a year, which more than made up for the setup time and things like that, and the fees that we're charged. For the properties that are less in demand, I don't know if we certainly saw an increase in the number of in the value and the of each booking, but it wasn't quite so high. but certainly where there's demand, where there's in a certain location, there's been a huge increase in the value of those bookings, and I think as a result, you know, it's had a huge effect on our business. Well, for me, the learning curve isn't so huge. So that's, you know, that's a main thing, because the entry and exit is zero effectively, apart from time to learn. So you know, you're not paying for this software. You're paying for, if it performs, you pay. If you get bookings, you pay. But it's the time dedicated to set up. So if you have a channel management, booking management system that is linked with Beyond, try it. Try it for 3 months. See how you go. You know, you put your checks in place. You set your old price in. You set the new price in. You can make comparisons. See how it works. You know, it really depends on what you and your owners want as your objectives. So if your owner says, well, I only want 5 or 10 bookings a year, and you know, it just covers its costs, it means we can come out and stay and it pays for that, then, you know, okay. But if your owner and you have objectives to be maximising the rentals of your property, maximising the performance of your properties, then this is the ideal tool.